Hey everyone, welcome back to RetroBreak and welcome to my thoughts on emulation. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with the thoughts that I've actually got, considering I'm actually a collector of physical games as well. But emulation is definitely an incredible thing and it's helped broaden my horizons, and I definitely see it as being a piece of the larger retro gaming puzzle that is the way I like to experience games. So even going way back to my very first PC that I ever had, or even before that, I had this disc here, and I've got so many great memories of discovering SNES games that I had no idea even existed, thanks to this CD-ROM right here. I actually got it at a PC convention at a local hotel, and I was going around and then someone was telling me, like, you can buy this disc and play every single Super Nintendo game ever created on the PC, and I was like, is that even possible? How does that even work? And then he showed me a demo and I picked this disc up. I must have only been like, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10 years old, and I think I was with my dad, so he picked it up and I took it home, and after struggling to try and understand how to get the games to run, I found out that I could play all of these games, and a lot of the games on here, for some reason back then, I didn't even equate them as actually being SNES games. I just thought they were random games for the PC that I'd never experienced before. So I was playing things on here like Mario RPG, like Mega Man 7 for example, not even realising that they were actually Nintendo games. I just thought they were either like weird fan games or like PC games that I didn't know existed. So that is my very strange beginnings into the world of emulation, but thanks to that, later on in life, I actually went back and bought the games that I enjoyed playing on that CD, and I really think that's one of the reasons that makes emulation so good. It's so easy to access an entire console's library of games, and it makes it so easy to experience a wide variety of different games without actually putting any money into it. And I'm not against anyone downloading ROMs or finding ROMs online or getting ROMs on things like this, or more recently these days, getting ROMs on Chinese emulation handhelds that come pre-built with basically every game for every system that this can handle on one micro SD card. And there was a time last year or a few years ago where I just kept receiving these handhelds from various Chinese companies to do videos on, and they were just full of games for every single system imaginable. And although I got completely burnt out about the idea of these retro handhelds, I still think they're great for people today to be able to buy this and to experience such a wide range of games. And then if you are interested, the option's always there to go out and get the original console, to track the games down, whether that's at conventions, whether it's buying official licensed versions on modern consoles and on PC, or whether it's just enjoying the games on those handhelds and then never thinking anything else of it. Honestly, it's up to you how you experience the games. At the end of the day, the game was made to be played, and it's just good that you're playing it and you get to experience it. And maybe through talking about that game that you've enjoyed, maybe you'll entice someone else to check that game out as well. And if it wasn't for emulation, that whole discovery process and the amount of information online about these games as well would be so much smaller and more limited than it is today. So emulation has done an amazing job in opening up the world of retro gaming to a much bigger audience. But as I got more into the hobby over the years, and as I started collecting more and more original hardware and trying to get the best out of the hardware, and I've done so many videos about that in the past, I began to feel a little bit conflicted about my thoughts on emulation versus playing on original hardware. So there was a time when I completely denounced emulation and I went completely original hardware. I had the money to buy all the games that I wanted for these systems, so I went all out. Didn't touch emulation for a long time. I didn't have any emulators installed on the computer. I wasn't interested in emulation handhelds. I was kind of a purist for a while, and kind of frustrating looking back that I was like that, because it's kind of gatekeeping a hobby that doesn't need to be gatekept, because there's no money exchanging hands to any companies that it actually matters for a lot of these games. Like, it doesn't really matter whether you get a ROM legally, illegally, whether you copy it yourself using an official cartridge or whatever. I know there's probably dubious legalities around that, but at the end of the day, if the company's not making any money, I think it doesn't really matter where you get it from. And the more important thing is that you enjoy the game, and then if a modern version of that game does come out in the future, then if you've enjoyed the game, you really should support the developers and the publisher by buying that official copy, whether it's something on the eShop or back in the day I liked to buy games on the virtual console that I played using emulators. So I really think it's good to give back to the industry, which is struggling now more than ever, when you do have the chance. So if there are any retro re-releases that you like the look of and you've played the game using an emulator in the past, please do support the companies that are putting the effort into bringing those games out for a more modern audience. So there are many improvements that emulation actually does to the original experience. Obviously, thanks to using emulators, you can then use things like save states, you can rewind and fast forward, and that makes some of these more difficult games so much easier to enjoy these days, especially when you don't have as much time as you used to back then, especially when it comes to JRPGs and stuff, and the ability to apply patches and use cheats a lot easier than on original hardware. It's all really good, and you can really speed up and improve the whole experience of playing the games. And then of course there's the other benefits of emulation as well, like being able to run things at higher resolutions, which is great for some of the more modern retro consoles that work in 3D. You can clear up a lot of the imperfections, you can improve the resolution, you can improve the frame rate sometimes, you can improve the loading speeds. There's just really no reason why anyone would realistically want to play these original games on original hardware anymore. You don't have to worry about aging hardware, you don't have to worry about finding memory cards. The list goes on and on. There's even some really cool things that emulation can do, like VR support. I was playing Metroid Prime 1 in VR and I could not believe my eyes, and if you'd have told me that as like a 10-15-year-old when that game came out, like you'll be able to actually be in the world that Samus can see through her visor and play the game that way, I would just not have believed it. It was honestly a mind-blowing experience, and emulation can provide those mind-blowing experiences that you didn't even think was possible out of the original games. There's also something else really cool that I discovered fairly recently, and I've been dabbling in a little bit, and that's retro achievements as well, and that's something that emulators can link into using APIs for different emulators and different consoles, and actually give you more of an incentive to play more of your favourite games by having different achievements to unlock, and having leaderboards and things like that for time trials and speedruns, and you get to see it all presented really nicely on a website. So there's so much cool stuff that emulation can do. And with all of the emulation handhelds available now as well, being able to take an entire systems library on the go and experience all the games portably in a really nice form factor like this one here. This is the RG35XX SP. This is one of my favourite ones, like an SP style clamshell design. It's just so cool to be able to take so many games on the go with you and use save states, and even more modern features like being able to use USB-C or mini HDMI out in order to capture games and stream them and stuff. It just makes everything so much more streamlined and so much more convenient as well. And then there's things like the Mister here, which some people argue whether it is or isn't emulation, but whether you think it is or not, it's basically a very accurate version of an original console, but still playing ROMs. So it's like high-end emulation, that's how I like to think of it, and it basically has the same purpose as downloading ROMs onto a computer and booting up an emulator, except it's all stored within one box, and you can kind of think of it as an everything console, but a lot more accurate to the original systems. And I think a lot of people should definitely check out the Mister if you want a more authentic experience without the need to actually buy and maintain all of the original consoles. And then by using things like the different scanline options or the CRT overlays and things like that, you can really get a very authentic experience out of a Mister or some other FPGA compatible device like the Analog Pocket. That's another one that's very, very close to representing true accuracy out of the original consoles. So if you did want a more authentic experience, you can go down that route as well. Or obviously there's also things like the Super NT, the Mega SG, things like that, which are FPGA consoles, and they provide an almost authentic experience, but with the benefits of the enhanced resolution and the HDMI out, which makes it feel a lot more modern. But with all of the amazing things that emulation and FPGA can bring, there's still something that always draws me back into the original consoles and still makes that my preferred way to play and experience the games, despite all of the modern enhancements and the affordability and the no barrier to entry that Emulation and FPGA brings, there's still something that pulls me back in to that original experience. And I'm sure a lot of you thinking are kind of wondering, like, why would you even go through the effort of playing these original consoles anymore when there's no reason to, there's no technological benefit of doing so, and in many ways you get a worse experience. So this might come off as a bit hipsterish, and I don't really want it to seem that way, but honestly that's probably the best comparison. Let me try and explain why I still prefer playing on original systems, despite all of the positive things that I've just mentioned. The first thing is the fact that it's just tangible. So instead of selecting Mario 64 from a list, for example, I can pull Mario 64 off the shelf and I immediately get that connection with the game. This is a game that I've had since 1998 or something, when I first got my N64 as a kid. I can open it up and experience the same memories that I had from back then. I can feel the same cardboard, I can see the creases that I left back then as well. And here's the cartridge, my original cartridge as a kid, and I actually took this to get it signed by Charles Martinet, and you can't ask him to sign a ROM, can you? So there's another tangible benefit of having cartridges. It's something to hold on to, it's something physical and tangible, and you also get instruction manuals, which I loved reading as a kid, and it's nice sometimes before you play a game to just open the box up and have a look through the instructions and just see all of the stuff that the developers went through the effort of adding to the experience of the game and the packaging that they didn't need to go into. Like, there was no reason to draw these different pictures of Mario and all these fun descriptions and fun little tutorials about how to do all the different moves and things. It's just an extra layer to the enjoyment of the games, and if you're going to go through the effort of playing these older games, you may as well also go through the effort for experience and everything else that came associated with it. And that's another reason why I love things like magazines back in the day as well. It's kind of getting your head into the time and people's experience with the games at the time, and I just love having the physical media and kind of thinking that people out there put so much time and effort into producing the code that went onto the ROMs, which was burnt onto the PCBs, which was then sent to a factory to turn into this game that I'm holding right here. And when you've just got a file off the internet, it doesn't come with the same history. It doesn't come with the fact that maybe you've bought a pre-owned game and it belonged to someone and they grew up with that game and they passed it on to someone else, and then you're owning part of their memories and their childhood that's being passed down, and then it's going into a collection to be appreciated for years to come. You don't get that with a file. Like, maybe your friend gave you a USB stick with a bunch of games on. There's no memories attached to that, there's no feelings attached to that. So maybe I'm going a little bit overboard with this, but I really do feel a strong connection to physical media in a way that experiencing anything online or in a digital form, you just don't get that same experience. I guess another way of thinking of it is kind of the same reason why people still enjoy reading physical books when ebooks exist, or it's the same reason why people like buying vinyl records or CDs when you can easily stream music and it's a lot cheaper as well. It's basically the same thing with any hobby. Like, if you're getting into the hobby, if you enjoy it more than just on a surface level and you want to go a little bit deeper, then it's really nice to actually own something that means something to you. And it's not only that, it's the experience of putting the cartridge into the console and booting the game up and turning on the CRT as well. That's another big part of the experience, which no emulator can properly emulate. I mean, obviously they've tried and there's some amazing scanline things out there, but nothing beats the satisfaction of turning a CRT on and seeing the game run at such nice motion clarity that no modern screen can match. Even top-of-the-line OLEDs with black frame insertion still don't come close to seeing a game, especially in 50Hz actually, a PAL game running at 50Hz, seeing that scroll from side to side on a CRT. There is no modern equivalent, and I don't know if there ever can be. It really is very surprising to see how much better something from the 90s looks on a screen like that, comparing it to playing it on any modern screen with an emulator. There just really is no comparison, and holding the original controllers as well is another big part of the experience. So a really great console to explain this one a bit better is the N64. Now, I know a lot of people aren't really super happy with the design of the controller, but there's no denying that the games were made with this particular controller in mind. So the way the analog stick is quite a wide range compared to modern controllers. The fact that it has a hexagonal input, so it actually sticks in certain directions. The fact that there's a Z trigger on the back, which makes it kind of really comfortable. There's no easy way to map this controller and control scheme onto a modern device, and you can play a game on the Switch Online collection, and play a game like F-Zero on there, or Mario 64 even, and then play it on the original hardware, and the experience is just a night and day difference. It is so much nicer playing it using an official controller on official hardware with the correct frame rate, the correct 240p resolution. No amount of upscaling and modern enhancements can beat the feeling of playing a game the way it was originally meant to be played and designed by the developers to take advantage of that particular hardware, of that particular era. Like, trying to play F-Zero X on any modern controller is just an absolute nightmare. The analog stick is way too sensitive on anything modern that's not an N64 controller. The way the Z and R buttons work just does not map to a normal controller properly at all without remapping it. So even just using the air brakes to drift left and right just does not feel right at all. Another example is Banjo-Kazooie, like holding the Z button and then pressing the C buttons here to do the different moves just does not feel right when it's mapped to a C stick. Or in Ocarina of Time, playing the Ocarina does not feel right if it's mapped to a C analog stick. So there's just something really nice about using the specific controller that the original console was designed for, and the marriage between them plus a CRT, it cannot be beaten, and I don't think it ever will be, and I don't think people should expect it to be completely honest. Like, it's good to have modern enhancements, but nothing beats playing everything the way it was originally intended. And there are exceptions, and this video could obviously go on for hours because I'm very passionate about this topic and I've got so much that I wanted to talk about, but hopefully that's kind of got my opinions across in a way that makes sense to some of you out there. Let me know your thoughts on emulation versus original consoles in the comments below, and let me know if you enjoyed this kind of more laid-back approach to just discussing a topic that I feel passionate about as well. That will do it for now though. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all again very soon. Goodbye.